get started today, we wanted to leave you with a few of Mary's words to just kick us off. And she said, "To think that Neverland was right here in my backyard, to think that dreams were born and that a time such as this was not on any chart but happened because so many hearts from my beloved hometown of Weatherford, Texas, and all who saw Peter fly into their windows believed in Neverland." She said this when she dedicated the statue that is still in Weatherford, Texas. It's my job to take care of those memories and make sure she's never forgotten. Her collection was donated to the Dansker Culture Center by her children, Larry Hyman and Heller Halliday, and we keep those memories alive for thousands of visitors who come through our doors. They get to play the piano that was in her first dance studio. That was one of the conditions of donation, is they get to actually play. They learned about her time on Broadway. They learned about how she gave back to her community. She never forgot that Weatherford, Texas was her home. And even as a young girl, she made it big, coming from a small town in Texas, and people are always inspired by that. So we love to treasure those memories and keep them alive. I'm going to talk a little bit about Mary's early background. This is what I focus on, and share with you some very personal photos from our collection of Mary. The curtain went up for Mary the day she was born, quite literally. Born in her parents' home in Weatherford, Texas, pictured here. To announce the arrival of their healthy baby girl, the curtains from her mother's bedroom window were raised. It was like the 1913 version of a Facebook post. Mary reflected in a memoir, "It must have been a good omen because curtains have been going up for me ever since." She came by her musicality honestly. Her mother was a violin teacher at the local seminary, and from a very young age, her hometown encouraged her creativity. She would dance and sing around the town square. There was a bandstand they'd let her get up on and sing. There's several great people who remembered that time. The local barber actually gave her a pair of scissors and taught her how to cut hair, and she then cut the hair of the cast and crew on South Pacific. Mary reflected on Weatherford by saying, "One of the most important circles of my life is the fact that every single solitary thing I learned in Weatherford, Texas, every experience, every little trick or skill, game or joke, was useful to me sometime, somewhere later on." As a budding performer, here's a Mary in her high school play. She took every opportunity to get in front of an audience. Her first public performance at the age of 5 was at the Weatherford Firemen's Ball, but she had numerous recitals, and she loved the energy of an audience. Mary opened her first dance school when she was 18, and to improve her ability to teach her aspiring students, she went off to Hollywood to train. When she returned, her parents had built her a studio, and it's that little red brick house. And it was a huge success. She actually expanded into neighboring towns, 2 neighboring towns. And she loved her performance, but she longed for the energy of that audience. So she left to pursue her career, which I'm sure all of you know, and became the Mary Martin we know and love today. And though her success was grand, Weatherford was never far from her mind. Her hometown celebrated her accomplishments and was always eager to welcome her home from a visit. When Hello Dolly came to Dallas on the tour, the Parker County Sheriff's Posse, which is the county that Weatherford, Texas is in, was there to greet her at the airport, and hundreds came from Weatherford to Dallas to watch her perform. There's a statue of Peter Pan in Mary's honor in Weatherford, designed and sculpted by Ronald Thomason, and the statue was taken from Mary's exact measurements. She also has an elementary school named for her, and at the museum, we let the elementary school come perform and enjoy the gallery once a year for free. The students come and sing Mary Martin songs. It's so lovely. And their director of the elementary school's choir is a Mary Martin huge fan, so that's special to us. Mary Martin's final resting places in Weatherford Weatherford City Greenwood Cemetery, and it has the clasped hands motif on the joint graves with her and her husband as a symbol of their relationship. But all of these memories from our archives mean nothing if we can't share them and they aren't left for future generations to find inspiration. We have a special little story from Lily Froelich, who is currently the dance captain on the national tour of Hamilton. She was also in Cats here on Broadway, I think. And she is from Weatherford, Texas, and she couldn't be here, but she wanted to give us a quote. That growing up, her mother started teaching me how to tap dance. When she saw that I liked to dance, she quickly enrolled me with classes with Holly Lee in Weatherford. Both my mom and Holly often spoke of our local Broadway legend, Mary Martin. She was put on a pedestal for me at a young age, and I would say, I want to be like her someday. I watched the VHS of Peter Pan ad nauseum. I sang My Heart Belongs to Daddy in my first musical theater review. So we love that our collection continues to inspire people to follow their dreams on Broadway. Now, that's my little history spiel that I'll be here to talk about the objects at the end. But George Dansker, our volunteer Mary Martin historian who just has a passion for Mary, is going to take you through a very special series of letters and photographs.
So instead of passing the baton, we're going to pass the mouse clicker. So, people ask me all the time, well, how did you get so interested in Mary Martin, and why do you have such a passion for researching and archiving her life? And I'll show you this slide. She was very kind to accommodate visitors backstage, and one of them was after Legends in 1986 in New Orleans, and she asked me what I did for a living, and I said, I'm a librarian, and she said, oh good, you can keep the facts straight about me after I'm gone. And I took that to heart. She was always more interested in you than you were in her. She wanted to know about your life and your dreams, your aspirations. And she asked for my address, and a little while later, a book came, and she signed it to Dear George, Our Circle Goes On and On, Love Mary Martin. And she believed in this circle of life theory, that everything that happened maybe when she was younger, she would run into it later on. Everything had meaning, everything had importance. So now we come to the letters, and Mary Martin was a great letter writer. Everybody of her generation was. You wrote letters, you answered the responses, and beautifully archived in the DOS collection is an amazing collection of letters. I'm going to share them with you, and I promise you, you will be learning some facts that you did not already know. Every time I go to these letters, I'm amazed. This one is very beautiful because it's a letter to her family when she was first in Hollywood. If you can see at the very top, it says Mary Martin on Hollywood. And she just has such a real outpouring of love for her family. She was about 24 years old when she wrote this letter. She had gone to Hollywood to become, hopefully, a movie star. And she writes, first let me say that words are simply inadequate. As far as you all are concerned, you never have failed me. And please know that I can only say thank you. I hereby promise you that someday I will repay you for all this faith that you have in me. That's a beautiful sentiment again, the 24, maybe even only 23-year-old Mary Martin. The letter has some unusual requests. She writes to her father, Judge Martin, and she says, can you please send me a Parker County watermelon? The ones here are funny looking, and oh gosh, does it make my mouth water. And so there's a vintage Weatherford, Texas watermelon. It looks as big as a truck. And since I've never had Parker County watermelon, so it's as good as they say.
So I can see why Mary needed it.
So here's another one, another letter, very homey. These are sort of just, the day-to-day events of life. But she writes to her mother and father, and she says, could you send my son Larry's tricycle? They have so many good sidewalks here. I would love for him to be able to ride on these sidewalks. And there's a wonderful picture of Mary Martin with son Larry Hagman. I think he was maybe about 6 or 7 years old in the photograph. She also writes home about new friends that he was making in the neighborhood. So this goes ahead a few more years after she's already somewhat established in Hollywood, and she is about 6 months pregnant with her daughter Heller, and she writes about going to a wonderful party where Loretta Young, Jean Arthur, Irene Dunn, all of them were there, and she said maybe because she was wearing maternity clothes she felt like a battle axe. But then she writes to her sister Jerry, and she said, but Richard, my husband, thought I looked wonderful, but then he's nuts. And this letter would be 1941, right before the birth of Heller, and we have a wonderful picture of Heller as a newborn. This is very nice. The left side is Mary with her sister Jerry. It looks like from their clothes, maybe 1940s. And the right side is a hand-painted card when Mary's sister would visit her at their home in Brazil. And the painting on the card actually became a needlepoint image for Mary later on. There was always such love between Mary and her husband, Richard Halliday, and early on, they had just been married a little while. Mary writes to her mother and to son Larry, who was at that point back home in Texas, and she said, Richard has been so wonderful during all this, I can't even begin to describe what he has done. But believe me, it certainly takes two to make one in this racket. And by racket, of course, she means the world of show business. And that two to make one is a theme you'll discover a little later on. This is a beautiful letter that Mary wrote to her daughter Heller in 1961. Heller was about 20 years old. I don't know the reason the letter was written or the occasion, but she said, again, it takes two to make one, but it takes three to make a family, and you have made ours a very rewarding one. And she said that in their family, they didn't celebrate Mother's Day or Father's Day. Every day was sort of a celebration of their life together. These are nice photos with Larry Hagman. The one on the left is with Richard Halliday. The one on the right is just Mary and Larry, and it looks to me like it's backstage at the opening of South Pacific, I would say in New York, 1949. I love this picture. Larry Hagman and his sister Heller Halliday at the NBC studios, and they look like they're very dressed for a winter day. The entire family. This picture is credited to, it looks like a circus event in the United Kingdom when Mary was there in South Pacific. So we have Larry, Heller, Mary, and Richard, early 1950s. Now these letters are full of the most amazing tributes. This is what I call presidential correspondence. When Mary Martin took Hello Dolly to Vietnam in 1965, she got an amazing letter from Lyndon Johnson, and he said, you are a frontline patriot in the work you are doing. You are making your president and all of Weatherford, Texas, deeply proud of you. Another nice letter came from First Lady Mrs. Richard Nixon. It says, it must be gratifying to you to have the ability to give so much pleasure to all who are fortunate enough to see you and to be loved by so many. That's an amazing letter to receive. When Mary Martin's husband, Richard Halliday, died, there was outpourings of condolence from all over the world. This came from then President Richard Nixon, and it said, the sad news of your husband's death touches many hearts who have admired and enjoyed the work you both have done. And when Mary suffered a near-fatal automobile accident in 1982, again letters came from everywhere, and this one came from then President Ronald Reagan. Now we come to the section that I call From Show Business Friends Far and Wide. This is probably one of my top favorite slides in the whole program. So on the left, Mary included this in her book. She's at summer camp, obviously, and she gave this picture to Oscar Hammerstein II, and she always claimed that he put a caption on it that said, this proves there's hope for everyone. And on the right side, we have a similar costume almost for South Pacific. but the picture was returned to Mary by Oscar Hammerstein II's widow, Dorothy, and she wrote that Aki loved the picture so much, and when he saw the picture, he thought of a younger Nellie Forbush. So this picture that he had all these years inspired the characterization of Nellie Forbush, which Mary did so brilliantly on Broadway. Now this is a fun one. This is from Jerome Kern, writing about a 78 RPM recording that never happened. It was called The Sweetest Sight, and part of the reason the recording was never made was they couldn't figure out what to put on the reverse side of it. So the song was published perhaps only in the United Kingdom. It's a beautiful song. Mary needlepointed it for Oscar Hammerstein II and for his wife Dorothy. And there was a recording that she made in 1961. It's a beautiful song, words by Oscar Hammerstein II, music by Jerome Kern, and I'd like for you to hear it.
I have seen a line of snow-white birds roll across an evening sky. I have seen divine unspoken words shining.
Wonderful autobiography, My Heart Belongs. She doesn't like to brag on herself. She really doesn't. It's on YouTube. You can find it, absolutely, for sure. So, but Mary did brag a little bit on herself when she wrote letters home. And so in 1943, she wrote to her mother and to Larry, and she said, Cole Porter called me up and said, when I sang That's Him, it was the greatest piece of musical artistry he had ever seen on any stage in any part of the world. That's a wonderful thing for Cole Porter to say to anybody, and he wanted her to do a show with him. Another Cole Porter show after Leave It to Me for Mary Martin never happened, although she was considered at one point to do the lead in Kiss Me Kate, but she had turned it down. Now we have Yul Brynner. They were fantastic friends. They appeared together in Luke's Song, and Mary Martin recommended him for the role of the King in The King and I, and he was forever grateful. And he writes, My dearest Mary, how wonderful to have your opening night wire on my makeup mirror shining with warmth and friendship. Thank you with all my heart. They worked together again in 1954 for the General Foods Show. It was a marvelous tribute to Rodgers and Hammerstein. And I'll give a little shout out to my friend Jane Clay in the front row. If you've never been to the Paley Center, please go, because these programs that I talk about that were on television are there for the viewing, and they are remarkable experiences. So Mary Martin was the host of the General Food Show, and she was working like a demon, making sure everybody was taken care of, and plus she had to do her own songs on the show as well. She was really quite amazing, and so Noel Coward wrote and thanked her for her kind attention to him, and he said, it was the most touching proof of friendship that anyone has ever given me, from Yul Brynner to Mary Martin. And years later, Yul Brynner visited Weatherford, Texas, and here he is posing in front of Mary Martin's family home in Weatherford. And these are just some assorted correspondences. The one on the left is from Irene Dunn, great star of screen, and Greer Garson, who was thanking Mary Martin for the joy of the Peter Pan telecast, and saying that when she puts Mary Martin records on the hi-fi, as she called it, her voice fills her house with liquid gold. And the one on the bottom is from Theodore Bickel. He had become ill during the run of Sound of Music, and Mary Martin sent flowers, and he's writing to thank her for them. The great director Elia Kazan thanks Mary for performing at an actor's studio benefit, and he says, you were magnificent, and I am most grateful to you, and I guess you have more stage authority than anyone in the theater today. This is probably like my favorite of all of them. A holiday card from Ethel Merman, and she says, it's so typically Merman, I think, in the way it's written. I can only wish you what I wish myself. Good luck, health, and happiness always. God bless you. Much love, Ethel. And also in the DOS archive are letters letters written from Ethel Merman's son thanking Mary for her kindness and support when Ethel had become mortally ill. Mary was one who visited her, cheered her up, inspired her, and the letters from Ethel Merman's son to Mary are quite beautiful to read. Mary Martin and Ethel Merman actually appeared at the Beverly Sills Farewell Gala in 1980, and Sills' thank you note to Mary Martin is wonderful because it says basically, if you don't get back on that stage, I'm going to have another farewell just to see you perform. And notable visitors came from everywhere. This is amazing. This is from Helen Keller, who visited Mary and her family at their Connecticut home, and Helen Keller talks about the beautiful aura. Typical David Merrick. So we have Helen Hayes, and this slide is very special because it's from Joshua Logan, the director of South Pacific, and he found a clasped hands for Mary on the card. People would scour antique stores finding these clasped hands images to send to Mary and her husband. In 1985, there was a wonderful tribute at the Schubert Theater called Our Hearts Belong to Mary. And the telegram on the left is from Jerome Robbins saying how much he loves her and he was sorry that he could not be there. The telegram on the right is from the Mary Martin Trauma Center in San Francisco, and it's another beautiful outpouring of love. Now this section I call job offers, okay? So let's hear some things that I guarantee no one has known, hopefully, before this afternoon.
Getting to know you, getting to know what
So what do you think I'm about to tell you?
getting to like you, getting to want you like me.
So, Mary Martin actually had an offer from Richard Rogers to appear in The King and I after Gertrude Lawrence so tragically passed away early in the run. And basically the letter says, this is it, hon, just say the word and it's yours. Yul Brynner had recommended Mary this time around because he really wanted to work with her again. It didn't happen. I really don't know the reason why it didn't happen, but it's wonderful to know that Mary was considered, and wouldn't that have been historic if she had done King and I for even 6 weeks on Broadway. Mary never did appear on the Ed Sullivan Show, or what it had been also called Toast of the Town. And Ed Sullivan wrote a letter and he said, please, hon, appear on my show sometime, will you? And I don't think it wasn't that she didn't want to appear on the show, but she had a family tradition of going to the country on Saturday night, because in those days there was no Sunday performance, and I don't think she wanted to trade that for her weekend in the country. How about this one? Cary Grant, writing in 1953, offering her to appear in a film adaptation of Terence Rattigan's 1945 play O Mistress Mine. The film, incidentally, was never made, not with anybody. But this one blows my mind. The film version of Cole Porter's Can-Can, they wanted Mary to do the role of pastiche in this. And it went actually to Shirley MacLaine, but Mary has a total invitation to do it from filmmaker Nunnally Johnson. This is in 1955. This one totally blows my mind because, frankly, I'd never heard of the movie, but it's called Friendly Persuasion, and this is from Irving Paul Lazar, and he wanted Mary to do a role in that film opposite Gary Cooper. And in this particular correspondence, they're talking about fees, and apparently it could have been the fee being offered wasn't acceptable. I don't have any return correspondence. I just know that this offer to do the film is in the files. Another one, I had to do a little sleuthing on this one because the letter talks about Vincent. I figured that would be Vincent Donahue, Mary's favorite director. The letter goes on to say, would Mary speak to Mr. Brenner, which would be Yul Brynner? And so I did a little more sleuthing, and I found that Mary was being considered for the film version of Me and the Colonel. But again, the movie was made, but not with Mary Martin. was talked about for some seasons that Mary Martin and Ethel Merman would do a musical version of Arsenic and Old Lace, and boy, it's a shame that didn't happen. That would have been amazing. Now we have South Pacific, and we promised some rare photos. I hope you haven't seen them before. This is an anniversary year for South Pacific because it premiered on Broadway in 1949. The first letter is kind of cool. It comes from the famous and legendary New York Times drama critic Brooks Atkinson. And apparently Brooks Atkinson said something about Mary Martin's performance in his review of the show, and she wrote to thank him for putting her perhaps dramatically on the right track, and then he wrote to thank her for thanking him. And it's kind of amazing to think of the back and forth between a star and a drama critic. And he basically said, "You are giving a wonderful, wonderful performance in general, and the whole job is superb." We do have some color of South Pacific. It's always wonderful to find these legendary shows in color. With Pinza, and then the final scene. Beautiful poster. And the role of Emile on the left was played by Ray Middleton by that time. We have Mary Martin taking South Pacific to London. This would be outside the theater with the fruit and vegetable vendors backstage. These are great photos, all with the great Ezio Pinza. The photo on the top I don't see too often. The photo on the left is more commonly to appear, and then a really nice photo of Ezio Pinza and Mary Martin backstage. More South Pacific, again, all of this is in the Doss collection. The picture on the left, I think, is from the 1957 West Coast revival, South Pacific, that Mary did. The picture on the right would be from New York. I love these in-performance pictures. Wash That Man, of course. And then the picture on the left is the final scene, and you get a really good idea of how the stage scenery was done, where I guess they call them trucks that move in and out. But it's a really amazing picture from the wings of the final scene. And speaking of final, this is Mary Martin's closing night in South Pacific. And again, Emile Debec by that time was played by Ray Middleton. You see all kinds of tributes. You can see by the heads that everybody is standing. And this is one of my favorite photos of all time. The final curtain of Mary Martin in South Pacific on a New York stage. Now we come to Peter Pan, Seldom Seen Images. Peter Pan kids meet the Sound of Music kids during the filming of Peter Pan, and one of the Lost Boys is actually in the Sound of Music at the same time. So he did the TV show in 1960, and then he did the Sound of Music when he wasn't busy filming. Mary writes in her book about doing a tour, it's a one-person tour, and it was Magic with Mary Martin and Music with Mary Martin. And she said that occasionally the theater was equipped so she could fly out over the audience like Sandy Duncan did when she did Peter Pan here in New York and on tour. But the Winter Garden, where Peter Pan originally was, didn't allow for flying outside the proscenium due to fire safety reasons. But occasionally Mary could do it. Mary Martin broke her arm during the rehearsals for the filming of The Last Peter Pan. And she was flying, and the person actually kind of dropped the rope. She said that he believed she was really flying, and he wasn't concentrating enough on it. So there's two funny stories. When she flew again the next time, they put a mattress up in the wings, and they said Mary Martin slapped here. That was the sign on the mattress. But her daughter Heller wrote her a very sweet letter, expressing a lot of concern. Heller was away at college, but she said, you remember this happened to Maria von Trapp during the rehearsals for Sound of Music, but you have one thing she didn't. You have one advantage over her. You didn't fly. She said, take care now. I love you, Heller. These are some great rehearsal shots from the 1960 filming of Peter Pan. The rehearsal. You see the wonderful backdrop. And then you have in rehearsal, the gentleman on the left is Peter Foy, who did all the flying. In the middle picture you have the lady that she's embracing is actually her stand-in, because Mary was doing Sound of Music 8 shows a week while she was filming the Peter Pan, so they did have to have a stand-in to set up the camera shots. And you also see Vincent Donahue, her favorite director, on the right-hand side of the picture, and again another of Mary rehearsing. Now we come to the Sound of Music, and we also have an anniversary year because this is the 60th anniversary of the Sound of Music, and lots of wonderful pictures to share with you. And what's interesting is that Mary wrote to a fan, and she said the show gave her such joy, happiness, and greater courage for climbing that mountain. So people reached out to her with great passion about this show, and people still do. I mean, it's one of the most iconic and beloved shows of all time. Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein wrote letters to Mary Martin when she signed the contract, and Richard Rodgers says that her telegram of acceptance gives him great joy, and he hopes that the songs will make her very happy. And Oscar Hammerstein, I think he says, no royalties could ever make us as happy as the telegram that you accepted the show. And this is a wonderful promo shot that they did for advertising purposes of the three of them, Mary in her nun's costume. Now we have the script of Sound of Music, and we brought that for you to look at. We have script changes. Mary had complete script approval. Characters came and went. There were more nuns in the original script version, and they took the lines and gave them to other characters. So there was a sister, Rafaela, who did not make the final cut. But these are letters from the director to Mary telling her the changes that were being made. This is from Maria von Trapp. I'm praying that this will be the greatest play ever. We've just finished working on the Lendler. That's a dance number from the show. Joe, meaning Joe Layton, is just incredible. And I love the way Maria von Trapp signs the letter. I can hardly wait to come down and see you. Until then, all my heart is with you, my dear, better self. So I know we are on Sound of Music, but I had a slide that mysteriously got in the wrong place, so I still have to play it for you. We'll jump back 10 years to South Pacific, and I have a very, very rare recording, audio recording, with Richard Rodgers at the piano for Mary Martin's television debut. Sound of Music, so same composer. So Sound of Music was such a big hit. The wedding gown that Mary Martin is wearing was by the noted designer Mamboche, and it was iconic. I mean, that picture was all over New York, so much so that Joan Crawford wrote to Mary Martin and said she would love a copy of the photograph. And Mary Martin writes back, I couldn't be more pleasantly surprised or more beautifully flattered, so the photo arrived at Joan Crawford's apartment a few days later. Another fan letter came from Doris Day, where she said, I have admired your work for so long. I am the biggest fan of yours. She wanted to come backstage to see the cast, but she was wearing a fright wig, she called it, to disguise herself so people wouldn't bother her in the theater. But she says, I'm a really, really big fan. And Mary responds, I've admired your work for the longest time, and I'm delighted to have the opportunity to thank you for giving me such enjoyment. In her autobiography, Mary Martin writes about a performance of The Sound of Music when there was a terrible blackout in New York, and they went on stage using flashlights or something so they could be somewhat illuminated, and Life magazine actually showed up and took a picture of that. And Mary's wearing what you might call like a dressing gown, because if it was the actual scene in the show, she would be wearing, and I know you know this, the poor didn't want this one dress, and that's what you would call it. Sound of Music in color, beautiful, beautiful color. These photos are actually online from the New York Public Library. Absolutely beautiful color pictures. And the dress on the right is the poor didn't want this one dress. Mary teaching the children how to sing. One's in costume and one looks just like it's posed for a photo session. And again from the New York Public Library, and I know that what the Reverend Mother is saying on the left is, don't be vain, my daughter, let me say it for you, you are indeed beautiful, my dear. And again, a beautiful color shot of the iconic wedding gown. Now, we know Theodore Bikel as a noted stage actor, folk singer, political activist, film actor, award winner, but what we don't know is that he was a marvelous photographer. And he stood in the wings for a couple of performances and just took pictures trying to capture the true essence or radiance of Mary Martin's performance. I had a chance to buy this entire lot of photos, which eventually will be in the DOS collection, but I'm sharing some of my favorite ones with you. They're not the last word in focus and clarity because it was not working with digital techniques, but they are amazing photographs, and I'm really, really happy to share them with you this afternoon. That's one of them right there, backstage. He worked with her, loved her, and he knew how to capture her essence. Backstage and stage door. Backstage celebrating birthdays. This is celebrating Mary Marlowe's birthday. Some of the children are eagerly eating the birthday cake. I've never seen this particular shot or scene photographed. This is my favorite things. More of my favorite things, and you see a wonderful shot of Patricia Neway. And this is one of my favorite pictures from the collection coming up, because obviously she is singing, I simply remember my favorite things and then I don't feel so bad. And the expression on Mary Martin's face is absolutely beautiful. So for the last time, I'll make a joke about the dress, but she's here absolutely saying the poor didn't want this one. The rueful look on Mary Martin's face is wonderful. She's telling the kids, I've never been a governess before, and they're saying, oh, maybe they can, get one over on her. Here is the start of Do Re Mi. Everybody sings. What songs do you know? More from Do Re Mi. All taken from the wings, so obviously Theodore Bikel is not in many of these pictures, although occasionally he did hand the camera over to somebody to take the picture. The song joyfully concludes. Maria praying for the Von Trapp children and forgetting the name of one of the children to pray for. discovers the curtains. That's an iconic moment from the show. Liesl climbs the trellis and says, "Are you going to tell on me?" That's Laurie Peters as Liesl. Lonely goatherd Gretel's hearing the thunder, and Mary's telling her what thunder really means, and it's not to be anything to be afraid of. And then we have the conclusion of Lonely Goatherd. Now I do have a special audio clip here, which is the title song from Sound of Music, recorded live 1961. There is harmony in the home, there will be order in the is order in the nation, there will be peace in the world. And this was so important to her. Any chance she got, she tried to share the philosophy of this wonderful proverb. And the concluding image is of the clasped hands, which was so important. This is her actual needle point of these hands. And I like to think, remember John Raitt once said about Mary Martin that those in the audience couldn't possibly love her as a performer as much as she loved them as an audience. So I'd like to think the clasped hands is not only an expression of the devotion of love that she had for her family and friends, but that every time she performed, she just reached out and clasped the hand of the audience in sheer love of performing. So this is what we call a very intimate, very personal side to Mary Martin, and I hope next time you listen to one of her recordings, you can sense or feel some of the love that she had throughout her entire life. Thank you very much. We have time for questions.
Questions want to come up. We brought some of the letters, the script from Sound of Music, and some of her needle points. So we'd love for you to come enjoy those. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Do you know how she picked to be a Peter Pan? Did she have a ballet background? She could fly like that? Or was it just her singing and they wanted it?
Well, she always wanted it because she writes how in the 1940s in Hollywood when they had costume parties, she would always go as Peter Pan. She loved to dress up as Peter Pan. As a child, she wrote that she always felt that she could fly, and she broke her collarbone jumping off the roof of her family house. She loved Peter Pan. She loved the story. She also loved things involved with Great Britain because she traveled there, performed there. So they came to her. They said, you know, we want to do this Peter Pan for you. And she said, I'll do it if I can have Jerome Robbins as a director choreographer because she knew how great he was. And then when they brought in Cyril Richard, the chance for her to perform with her daughter, she did have a tremendous ballet background. And I asked her daughter Heather one time, I said, did you have to do a lot of warm-up exercises backstage before every performance of Peter Pan? And Heather said, no, I didn't do that much dancing or flying in the show, but Mary Martin did. She had all kinds of people working with her to keep her limber and in shape to get through 8 shows a week. Oh, sure, please. Yeah, she was Mary Virginia Martin, but if you do all the names, it would be for the 2 marriages, Mary Virginia Martin Hagman Halliday. But Mary Martin was absolutely the name she was born with.
So Mary Martin is like part of her family?
Yes, he's her son by her first marriage to a lawyer, Ben Hagman, but the marriage did not last too long. But the second marriage to Richard Halliday is where Heller Halliday comes. And they were married until his death in 1973.
Yes, I'll try this one. Being at the age where so many people are playing transgender roles and switching it up, did she have to say how she felt about playing a boy?
Well, she talked a little bit about it because she always felt that Peter Pan could be any gender. She didn't feel that it should be assigned to a specific one, but she would talk a little bit about her own physical attributes. So she said, my figure allowed me to easily do the role, and then actually for the unflying number, she had to wear a body mic just for that number because she was so high up the sound wouldn't come down. So she talked about devising a lady's corset or girdle that they cut a hole in for her head, so she wore an upside down girdle for that number, and so she helped, you know, create more, I guess what you call a boy-like figure. So please come up and look at what we brought. I mean, some of the letters that are on the screen, the letters are actually here.
And then our Peter Pan will draw, so just look at the number on your ticket, and we're giving away some items. So the first up, we're going to do a Peter Pan sketchbook, and it's just a sketchbook, but this is a sketch of Mary as Peter Pan done by Ronald Thomason. The statue was created in 1976 and dedicated in Weatherford, Texas.
And
So,
does everybody have a ticket?